to the Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Welcome and thanks for listening. Well, I just got back from Leadville, Colorado, self-made training camp. So we went out on Thursday, came back on Monday, and covered a lot of the 100-mile course that I'll be running. The idea was to gain confidence in my training. So put it to the test at altitude, put it to the test in mountains, technical, climbing, descending, and so forth. One of the mantras that I've been going over and over in my head is, how much do you want the outcome you visualize? So I've been doing a lot of visualization of me in various places at various times on the mountain, because I got to tell you, there were some episodes during the training that I thought, why am I here? Why am I putting myself through this, going up these big mountains and huffing and puffing? And I had to keep coming back to, I like to do hard things. I want to test my body. I want to prove that if I can do it, other people can do it, and I want to choose strong. So my mind at times wanted to stop me, but I know my body will carry me if I can just keep my head screwed on, and that's really somewhat what it's about. But nevertheless, coming from sea level to base camp at 10,100 feet and climbing up above 12,000 feet, there are some physiological differences. So I want to talk about altitude a little bit, because some of you may travel to places where there's high altitude or consider it. And I want to give you a little heads up about what you might do to get ready for it. I would recommend going to Colorado. It's a beautiful state. The mountains are like no others, and exploring. Nothing better to being outdoors. So let's just jump right into things. The good and the bad. My running coach had suggested that when we got out to Leadville on Thursday, we should do a little bit of just a shakeout run. So 2 or 3 miles, get the cobwebs out from flying all day and see how things, just get ready for the next day. We were going to meet him on Friday, which would have been the first full day there at 6:30 a.m. to do a long training run. So the idea was just to kind of get the lay of the land a little bit. Last year when we were out in June for a training run, my ankle was pretty painful, and I couldn't put much weight on the right foot, and I was kind of hobbling down. So one place in particular that we didn't get last year was in the last probably 6 or 7 miles of the course. You go down this section. It's called Mini Power Line. And if you can think about the power line, how steep it might be, and then add a bunch of rocks and scree, which is loose rock, that's what it looked like. And last year we looked at it from above, and I wasn't even sure that they'd make people go down it. It looked pretty steep and fierce, but it was true. So we decided to check that out on Thursday afternoon. So we didn't get in as early as we would have liked. So by the time we got checked into the hotel in Leadville, it was about 5:30, so it would have been 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. So we decided to go out and see what we could do. So we parked at the base of that mini power line and basically got out of the car and tried to hike up that hill best we could. And we were immediately huffing and puffing bad. And it put the fear into me. It's like, geez, if just going up this 1/4-mile hill is causing me this much grief, what in the world am I going to do tomorrow on a 20-mile run in similar situations? And so we went up that hill and turned around and came down it. Down is often as hard as up, but this year my ankle's better, so I didn't have the pain in my ankle going down and felt pretty good going down. And we decided to run out the dirt road, which was just probably a 2 or 3% grade up for a little bit. And we did that. And it's like, I want to go up the hill one more time. So we went up about halfway and came down. And it's like, that's enough. So basically 1.8 miles and we were cooked on Thursday. Well, that set me up for a sleepless night on Thursday night thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow? I haven't actually met this coach. We've only talked online and Zoomed, and he's going to come here and I'm going to be huffing and puffing when we first start out. He's going to either drag me or quit, or I'm going to quit. What could possibly happen? So I didn't have my head in a very good space to start with. And the night was somewhat sleepless. We tried to go to bed early for being out there, but nevertheless, got up the next morning and met the coach, and he right off the bat said, we're going to take it easy. We're going to go up this part and section called Power Line, because you'll be doing that in the mile 80s. So we'll work our way in from Power Line into the finish. So that was the plan, about a 20-mile run. And he said, we'll take it easy and we'll hike and get used to it. And it was about 35 degrees, so it was cold. We forgot our poles. We left them in the trunk of the car where we parked. So up front, we're going to be without hiking poles, and it's cold, and we started out. But it felt much better on Friday. It wasn't near as bad. We took our time and paced it. And it wasn't too bad. Some of the sections where last year I had seen and thought were just really, really technical and almost impossible to run. This year, it's like, I think I can run some of those sections. So I certainly wasn't as fast as I need to be, but wasn't that far off. So I thought, still have a chance. It's not zero. We got to keep at it. There's work to do, but we'll keep going. And then on Saturday, we came and did the big climb over what's called Hope Pass, or up to Hope's Pass. And that takes you well over 12,000 feet. And we had 3 snow crossings. And when I say snow crossings, the snow was about to your knees, but it was packed down tight. So if you walked on other people's tracks, you would stay in that packed snow, but your pole might go down. We remembered our poles the next day, but your pole might go down a couple of feet. So it was somewhat treacherous and slippery. Of course, we had running shoes on, not boots, no crampons or anything. So it made for some funny photographs. But nevertheless, we got across those, and it was a steep climb. Again, goes from about 9,500 feet above sea level to over 12,000 feet of sea level in 5 miles. So it's switchbacks, but a lot of climbing, roots, rocks, some flat areas, but absolutely gorgeous. And there were a fair number of people out, and we saw people coming down, and they said, be careful, it's really windy up there on the top of the pass. And be careful, it's really windy up there on the top of the pass. And where we were in the woods at the time, it didn't seem that bad, and it was actually kind of hot. It was probably almost 70. So we didn't think a whole lot about it, but when we got out above tree line, the wind really, really kicked up, and I actually put a light rain jacket on, but I put it over my vest. I couldn't zip it all the way. So it was open, and there was a hood, and the wind started really grabbing it like it was a kite. And going through the snow, and again, it made for some balance issues. And as we went back and forth, and as you get to the top, you're really doing switchbacks on this loose rock type of thing. And it was pretty much all I could do to hang on and not fall over. And when I got to the top, I didn't really feel that comfortable as staying up there standing. So I actually sat down for a minute, waiting for Michael to come the rest of the way up. And even sitting, I wasn't comfortable, but the hood of my jacket was blowing. So I decided, if you want to come on up, Michael, come on up. But I'm gonna come down, and we'll pass in the way. And that's kind of what we did. So we didn't go down the other side. We just retraced our steps back. And then the third day, we did another 10-mile run, walk, hike on another section of the course, again, retracing steps from that Hope Pass back towards the start for about 10 miles over a section that we hadn't been. Unfortunately, we made a wrong turn and got almost a mile off course and missed some of the climb. So we caught it on the way back, but we had to catch a Jeep trail to go up to the top to hook onto the trail. And when I say a Jeep trail, I certainly wouldn't take any vehicle that I owned up that particular trail. It was rocky, rooty. I could see you losing an oil pan or something, maybe a four-wheeler, but it was plenty of challenge just walking up with poles, just hiking up. So it was a good challenge. So what I want to go over is, what does altitude do to one when you come from sea level or anything really below 5,000 feet? What actually happens, and maybe what you shouldn't do with regards to what we really did. But first of all, I'd like to kind of go over what I ate, because this is a plant-based wellness podcast, and that'll let you have a little bit of idea into how we travel plant-based into remote areas. And Leadville is a very small mining town, if you've not been there or heard of it. And there was a Safeway grocery store that was pretty limited. There was a Whole Foods about 40 minutes away that we stopped at to get some supplies. And with the altitude, anything in a bag was puffed really far out, so it was pretty wild to look at. But when we arrived at Denver, one of the first things we did, we have a little restaurant that we go to near the airport. It's called Pho 92. And I think it's probably a bit of a chain, but nevertheless, you can get some really good pho, and with very, very fresh vegetables, and they get it out quick. So that's what I had: rice noodles, broth, cauliflower, bok choy, broccoli, carrots, some onions, bean sprouts, some jalapeno peppers, some Thai basil. So absolutely delicious. And I ate all of that broth because I wanted to hydrate. It was salty, not horribly salty, but I was on a mission to use that salt to hydrate, and I'll get to that in a little bit later. Before we left in the morning, though, I had prepared us a fruit bowl with some granola. And so we took that. We had watermelon and mango. It's mango season in Florida. And so we took some good mango and some granola and had that at the airport. And, if you're traveling, that's an option. Fruit gets through TSA. If you make you do a Tupperware bowl, you can put it in a backpack, and it's actually a great way to travel. And so you're going to get some fruit in the beginning of the day if you start out that way. So we had the fruit bowl, and then we had the pho, and we went and did our little run. And there is a really good pizza shop in Leadville, and we were able to get a plant-based pizza. So basically pizza, no cheese and tomatoes, but we had tomato sauce and a bunch of different veggies, and they loaded up. So we had lots of greens and tomatoes and peppers and mushrooms, and some olives. So it was a good dinner. From then on, we were a little bit on the scant side. So we had got some granola at the Whole Foods store, and we got some soy milk, and we got more fruit. So we had breakfast at the hotel before we went out. And on the trail, we took sun butter and jelly sandwiches, along with gels and Gnarly and Tailwind, which is sports drink that has some sodium in it. And we also carried a bladder with 1.7 liters of water. So that's what we took on the trail every day. You might ask me about sun butter. One of the reasons why we eat sun butter is basically because when Caleb was starting to go to preschool a little bit, the peanut allergy was so bad, and when he had friends over, Addie would get sun butter, and it actually tasted pretty good. And if you look at the nutrition and macronutrients, it's almost identical to peanut butter or almond butter. There's a little variation in saturated fat, but if you get plain unsweetened sun butter and plain unsweetened peanut butter, they're pretty close. So there's no real benefits. The omega-6 profile is about the same. Saturated fat's the same. Polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fat. Protein's about the same. Maybe 1 gram difference here or there. Again, depending on the brand that you buy. But for the most part, they're the same. So it becomes taste. That sun butter's pretty easy to spread on bread. We purchased Dave's Killer Bread for our sandwiches. Didn't carry sourdough bread there. So sourdough or Dave's Killer Bread with sun butter and jelly was our main solid foods on the trail. And we did that all 3 days. And I got to tell you, that really picks you up between the bread, the peanut butter, and the jelly. The jelly gives you a quicker lift. The bread is a little bit slower. And the nut butter, or I guess it's seed butter, kind of slows the digestion so you don't have, you don't lose that glucose real quick. And it tends to hang on pretty good. So, and it's pretty digestible with water. And it went down good. So that was a win. Next meal was Thai food and some vegan sushi and spring rolls. And then when we went back to the airport, we again had the pho. So not a big variety, but simple food with getting all our greens and getting hydration, fresh vegetables and fruit. Pretty good for being in a remote area. So you can do those things. You just have to pay a little attention about what you're looking for. And, maybe plan a little bit ahead and have some bowls. When we went to the hotel they had breakfast. So we, used some of their bowls and utensils. So it all works out. But, once you think about some things, you can pack, accordingly. And then we actually brought, some of the stuff home. We just put it in a Ziploc so it wouldn't explode with the altitude. Another lunch sandwich that we had after we got back, we had hummus and some vegan cheese and on bread. And it's like, oh my goodness, the vegan cheese. But, so it did have some fat. But the calories that we expended, I felt pretty comfortable with a sandwich of hummus, trying to get some extra protein in, and the vegan cheese. So, and we got a variety that's pretty clean as far as not a lot of extra oils with a nut base. So not too awful bad. So what did we do wrong? And what did I notice up front? The first time we went to Leadville, as soon as we got out of the car and just kind of did it, we waited till the next day to do a little bit of a shakeout run, and we knew we were short of breath all of a sudden. And the first time we went, we actually had a little bit of tingling in the fingers intermittently, and a bit of a headache. So the second time we went to Leadville, I really made sure we started to hydrate very good. Sometimes on the airplane, you don't want to drink a lot of fluids because you don't want to have to get up on a 3.5-hour flight. But as soon as I hit the terminal in Denver, I really started pushing the fluids. And again, we continued to push fluids through lunch. Allowing a little extra sodium in the soup, and drinking water and keeping the water bottles filled. Because that's actually very important to try to prevent altitude sickness. And signs of altitude sickness or altitude change, obviously, is shortness of breath is probably the first thing. The percentage of oxygen in the air doesn't change, but the barometric pressure increases, decreases as you go higher. So there's less pressure, so the oxygen molecules spread apart. And so with each breath, you get less oxygen in. So there is a kind of a calculation that some of the mountaineering sites give. At sea level, oxygen is about 21% saturated. At 5,000 feet, which would be Denver, it's about 17.3%, the equivalent of 17.3% saturated. It's still the same, but again, with the oxygen molecules out, that's really what it feels like. And then at 8,000 feet, 15.4%, and then at 10,000, 14.3%, and all the way down to 13.2% for the feeling of getting oxygen when you're up at over 12,000 feet. So it's basically, when you look at the barometric pressure at sea level, it's about 10 meters of water pressing down, and as you go up, there's less air, so there's less pressing down on you, so there's less to keep the air oxygen molecules together. And so, the basic things that can happen. Again, shortness of breath that people may notice right up front, fatigue, because again, you're not delivering the oxygen to your muscles that you normally would, having difficulty sleeping, and we'll go into that a little bit more detail as to why. The headache comes from a change in pressure and vasoconstriction in the head and the skull. Nausea, vomiting even. You'll notice an increased heart rate. If it got really bad, people can actually have a blueness of their skin. If they're not getting enough oxygen in, they can get confusion. Chest tightness, exacerbation if people have coronary artery disease or some vasoconstriction. They can have more chest pain. People can even pass out. They can be unsteady and dizzy because of the changes in cerebral blood flow. And a cough is not uncommon. Usually most of these symptoms don't start till about 8,000 feet. We got there fairly quick. We got at Denver at 5,000, and within an hour we were at 8,000 feet. So we went from 10 feet in Florida to 8,000 feet pretty quickly. What we did that was probably not that smart was we stayed on our running schedule and decided to run up that hill as soon as we got out of the car. So we didn't acclimate at all, other than, hydrating a little bit. But we didn't stretch, we didn't walk, we just took right up that hill. A smarter person would have probably expected to be very, very short of breath, but I just assumed that, I should acclimate and it shouldn't bother me this much. But the reality of it was, it wasn't as much my physiology as it was the barometric pressure and the lack of oxygen that I was breathing in, and I had not adjusted to it. That increase in respiration is really important because the first thing your body does when you're not getting, when there's not as many oxygen molecules is your body is somewhat starved for oxygen. You don't really, most people wouldn't drop their oxygen saturation if they had that much, if they had a pulse oximeter, but you can. So depending on from where you start with, you could actually drop down in the 80s, which would make things very significant. If people are anemic, obviously will make it worse because your hemoglobin carries oxygen molecules. And so if you have less hemoglobin and you have less oxygen molecules, it's going to make it that much worse. That's why people that live at high altitudes or mountaineers tend to have high hemoglobins because it adjusts over time. Your body puts out more red blood cells from the spleen when you're chronically at a higher altitude. That can be good and bad because if your blood has more molecules in it, more hemoglobin molecules, it's thicker. And if you become dehydrated, then those hemoglobin molecules get stuck in little arteries and you could have lack of blood flow or an infarction. So it's not all that it's cracked up to be. Your body over time does make more red blood cells by the hormone that's produced by the kidney called EPO, but that occurs over time. It's not something that occurs over a couple of days. It's more months to years type of thing. So the first thing, again, you breathe harder because you're trying to circulate less oxygen molecules. And when you're breathing harder, you're breathing off carbon dioxide. So if you hyperventilate at sea level, you get dizzy because you're breathing off carbon dioxide. And if you hyperventilate a lot, you can get so dizzy that you actually pass out. And when you pass out, you won't breathe for a minute and everything will start to normalize very quickly. Your hemoglobin molecule carries carbon dioxide and oxygen, and it has to be balanced. So if you blow off a lot of carbon dioxide because you're breathing heavy, your body hangs on, your hemoglobin hangs on to those oxygen. So even though there are less oxygen molecules around, when you hyperventilate, you actually shift that so the oxygen molecules are actually more tightly held onto the hemoglobin, so it kind of makes matters worse at first. But the biggest thing that happens is when you breathe off the carbon dioxide, your pH starts to go up and you become alkaline. So carbon dioxide is a measure of our metabolism. So when we take in food and we use it for energy, the energy is ATP. The molecules on the side are water and carbon dioxide. And we have to excrete that carbon. And so it's in the form of carbon dioxide. So when we're breathing, if you retain carbon dioxide, your pH will go down and you'll become acidic. So if you were not to breathe, or people have pneumonia and they're not breathing enough, their pH can lower. If they some end-stage heart failure, people's pH can start to drop because they become acidotic. But when you're hyperventilating, your pH actually goes up and you become alkaline. And everybody's like, well, alkaline sounds good because they sell alkaline water and it must be really good. But in this case, your body can't really regulate very quickly. And so you start to have these symptoms of potential nausea and GI distress. And it takes a couple days for your kidneys to regulate and actually hang on to bicarbonate, or actually get rid of the bicarbonate so that you can normalize your pH. If you're dehydrated, it makes it worse because now the kidneys can't get rid of the bicarb because you're already dehydrated. So that's the reason for hydrating, is so that you can keep flushing things out and your kidneys keep working so that your pH can normalize into that normal neutral 7.4 number. If you don't, again, in severe cases, you can get fluid in the brain, you can get fluid in the lungs, which causes, confusion and shortness of breath. When you're taking in less oxygen, your body, and especially your kidneys and your lungs, say, hey, we're not getting enough oxygen. So what typically happens in the lungs is the blood vessels constrict. And when they constrict, it's even harder for some of the oxygen to pass through. So you can get an increased blood pressure in the lungs, which can lead to even some bleeding in the lungs. So it can cause some problems if you're not careful. When it comes back to the sleep, I often talk about a body battery, and the body battery, on my Garmin, it takes into account heart rate variability, it takes into account sleep, general fatigue, heart rate, respirations. Well, my body battery was really like it tanked the next day, and it stayed tanked. It was very, very low. We did, start out, usually my body battery is above 70, sometimes 100. But it's, certainly I'm happiest when I'm in the 80, 90 range. Waking up with the body battery 30, and by the end of the day it was 5, not going up much more, and then just going down really quickly, and actually was feeling fatigued, so I was blaming it on lack of sleep or not being able to sleep, time change, 2 hours difference, on and on and on. But when I got to thinking, and it actually was the second night when it hit me, I was laying there and I'm breathing heavier. I'm usually a pretty slow, easy breath in. I practice my breath work, and I don't breathe heavy, and I don't breathe frequently. I try to keep my respirations down. I try to keep very tolerant of CO2. But I noticed that I was really breathing. I had my mouth closed, but I was breathing very frequently. And it's like, that is odd. And I tried to slow my breath down, but I really wasn't. So I never checked an oxygen saturation, but and I didn't feel short of breath at all, but the increased respirations was enough to actually tank my body battery and cause me not to get really good sleep. By the last day, my body battery started to go up into the 40s, so I think I was acclimating some, but nevertheless, it's another thing that you have to take into account is your overall breathing frequency. Now, when I was climbing the big climbs, obviously we're breathing heavy, and breathing heavier than if I were running in the, fast on the flat. And that is a good thing, again, because you have to take in more oxygen, because if you're exerting yourself, your body needs more oxygen, so you have to breathe more frequently to deliver the oxygen to get oxygen into the bloodstream to deliver it to the tissues. So one of the things that you have to be aware of is that when you exert yourself at altitude, you're going to be breathing harder and more frequently. And that's a good thing, and it's something that shouldn't be suppressed because you're trying to, again, get in more oxygen. But by doing that, you're also getting rid of more CO2. So again, you have to be hydrated and allow the kidneys to do their job and to compensate for everything. There is a medication called acetazolamide that helps your body get rid of bicarb. It's sometimes indicated in certain people, especially if they're having a hard time acclimating or if they have problems. I didn't want to play that game because it's hard enough when you're running to figure out your nutrition and figure out sodium with the drinks, the electrolyte solution, and how much fluid again. So I didn't want to mix that up. I wanted to let my body kind of compensate on its own. So that's what I did. But again, those are some things that you can expect if you're in an altitude situation. And again, I would be kind to yourself and let your body acclimate a little bit, and don't force it. We got a little bit of cough that first day running up the hill. Most likely it was bronchial congestion. It wasn't productive at all. But and that was the only day that I had a cough. But it's something to beware of. If you have any cyanosis or change in color or chest pain or shortness of breath or oxygen desaturation, the best treatment is to go to a lower altitude. So get off the mountain, go from 12 to 10, but maybe drive to less than 8 would be the ultimate solution. There's a guy that you may have heard of, Wim Hof. He is, I believe, a Danish fella, but he has done a lot of breath work, and he has done a lot of breath work with climbing mountains. And he talks about you can, do some training with some breathing and breath hold. It can increase your hemoglobin a little bit. It can also change the pressure in your skull to kind of help with a headache. But again, you can look him up. But it's not something I would do at sea level, and you certainly you wouldn't want to do that on your first try out. So there was a study that came out June 25th, 2025 in the American Heart Association, and the headline was that heart disease has decreased in America since 1970 from the time 1970 to 2022 significantly. And that was I guess the tagline of the study. But when you read it a little bit, it's not quite as good as what they claim. And the first thing that falls out is that deaths from acute heart attacks have decreased since 1970. But deaths from heart failure and hypertensive heart disease and arrhythmias have increased since 1970. So it depends on how you look at the numbers. The other thing that's happened since 1970 is the age of the population has increased. So there's more people in that heart disease group now than there was in 1970. It's went up from 108,000 to 222 million. So quite a significant rise in older people that are heart attack age. Life expectancy has also gone up from 70.9 to 77.5 in 2022. But there's still a fair number of people that die each year of heart disease. And if you look at the numbers, in 1970, 41% of the deaths, of all the deaths, and I believe there was over 100, almost 120 million deaths, but 41% of those were from heart disease. That's 733,273 deaths in 1970. If you look at 2022, the statistic that's read is 24% of the total deaths. But there were still 701,445 deaths from heart disease. So actual numbers, not much different between 1970 and 2020. In 1970, 54% of the deaths were from an acute heart attack. 46% were from chronic ischemia. In 2022, there was 29% from an acute heart attack, and 71% were from chronic heart disease, hypertensive heart disease, high blood pressure induced cardiomyopathies, congestive heart failure, and arrhythmias. And that makes sense. Stents came out in the 1990s, for the most part, late 1980s, 1990s, stents came out, and they were pretty, they came a long way pretty quickly. But for the most part, that is a life-saving procedure. If you're having an acute heart attack with complete obstruction of the coronary artery, and you get to the hospital within 30 minutes of your symptoms, and there is an interventionalist on call, a stent is a life-saving procedure. However, the overall health of our population has increased, so more and more people have chronic disease. So the blockages build up slower. They don't cause, there's not as many acute, complete obstructions as there are gradual narrowings, perhaps. Again, high blood pressure and vascular disease causing heart failure, diabetes causing heart cardiomyopathies, and again, arrhythmias because the heart muscle is stretched out from various causes, all continue to occur. So, it's better. People don't die suddenly younger, but the chronic disease part still exists. And we look about, what's changed. Again, the biggest thing to me is the biggest life-saving acute intervention is stents. That by far is a life-saving procedure. A lot of people would have died right on the table. Before stents, there was a medicine called thrombolytic therapy. It's still used in some remoter areas today that causes your blood to not clot, and so the clot in the artery will dissolve. And that was also beneficial as far as saving people. And if you were in a remote area, it would be better to have that done than nothing until they could get you to a place where you could get a stent. But that was a game changer because, again, if the artery clots off, unless it unclotted on its own, and it does over time, the body starts to change its coagulation, but the damage is usually done. And so people either have what people used to hear as a massive heart attack. So their heart function heart was so weak afterwards, they died then, or they died suddenly because there was so much dead tissue. So that's been a life-saving procedure for cardiovascular disease. But as far as other things, the statins, there's a large percentage of the population that are on statins, and we really haven't moved the ball as far as that goes. Things for cardiomyopathies, lowering blood pressure, angiotensin converting enzymes, angiotensin receptor blockers, things that make the heart contract more vigorously. None of them have really moved the needle as far as deaths from cardiovascular disease. Defibrillators may have, that people wear, have helped some, but when you look at the number of arrhythmias people are having, still, we don't seem to catch, there's a lot of people that either don't have the defibrillators or there's an arrhythmia that, or the heart failure, something causes the heart function to get worse, and it's not effective. Just to kind of go aside, a defibrillator, difference between a defibrillator and a pacemaker is a device that will monitor the heart's rhythm, and if the heart rate becomes too slow, it will pace the heart to a normal rhythm, and it actually can increase the heart rate when you move. It won't do anything if you're having a bad rhythm or a fast rhythm. It just sits back. It's basically an umbrella for slow heart rates, but it doesn't do anything for fast heart rates. Defibrillators that also have pacing capabilities, they can shock the heart back into a regular rhythm, so they watch for these arrhythmias. They're from the bottom of the heart, the arrhythmias that are most dangerous or lethal. So they monitor for various algorithms of how many beats in a row, and so they'll charge and shock or not shock or try to pace the person out of the arrhythmia. And it sounds like a great thing unless you've been shocked. Again, it's life-saving, so thank God you got shocked. But it is very stressful to people that have been shocked by them. So typically they're placed on medications to try to avoid those rhythms. But in the elderly population, it takes away perhaps a peaceful ending. And I'm not saying that to be cold, but if you have heart failure and your heart doesn't beat, contract properly, then you don't supply your tissues, and you can have decreased blood supply to the tissues. People can have, limbs that don't get enough blood flow to, severe shortness of breath, fluid in the lungs. And that's a tough ending as well. So in elderly people, sometimes passing in your sleep is not a bad way out. So it's really good to talk about all those things with your doctor before people commit to these defibrillators, because there are criteria that a lot of people meet, but you have to think about, what am I going to do with it? And over the years, I've had people say, turn them off. And they've lived for a long time with them turned off. It depends on the situation. I've also had them in younger people that, again, they were life-saving. They would have died if they hadn't had them. So it's not for everybody. And again, it should be something that has a lot of discussion, the risks versus benefits, before people go ahead and doing them. What has changed? The diet. Has the diet gotten better or worse? I think the diet is probably worse since 1970. We have more processed food, more fast food restaurants, more things that are goopy with all kinds of oils and preservatives, glyphosate, and all kinds of different things. So I do believe our diet has gotten worse. Portions have gotten bigger. People eat less at home. People cook less at home. People grow less food of their own. So I think that's gotten worse. Certainly obesity has gotten much worse since 1970. So I think that all contributes to things like cardiomyopathy, diabetes, ischemic heart disease from that aspect, that has made us not to make big changes in the overall incidence of heart disease. It all comes back to, one of the easiest things to fix is cardiovascular disease. And it's the easiest way to fix it is through diet and exercise. And it doesn't even have to be, certainly if people have severe blockages, the more plant-based and the more greens they can get in, certainly the better. But, making strides towards back to that 1970 diet with whole foods, less processed foods, certainly goes a long way to decreasing the incidence of heart disease. A guy came into the office the other day, and he was telling me he was carnivore and how great it was, and he lost all this weight, and he has decreased inflammation, and he feels great. And I said, great, I'm glad you're feeling better. I said, but, we have one thing in common. And he said, what's that? And I said, apple pie is not on either one of our diets. And he looked at me, and I was like, yeah, no, you can't, you won't eat apple pie because you're a carnivore, and it's, it's too much, it's sugar, right? With the apples and the sugar, they don't want carbohydrates. And I'm not going to eat the apple pie because of the pie crust and the lard and all the fat in the pie crust. So both of us eliminated pastries from our diet with these extremes that resulted in both of us getting healthy. Now, I believe that I'm a lot healthier than he is. He's going to plateau because he lost his weight, and so he can do a little bit more exercise. But the greens with vasodilatation, the fiber that we eat, the antioxidants, and plant-based nutrition goes a long way to decrease the incidence of congestive heart failure. We eat a low-sodium diet. Dilate blood vessels, make the blood vessels more elastic, decrease blood pressure. So there's a lot that we can do being plant-based, and that exercise is the other key ingredient, that we have to move our bodies to maintain muscle mass, to maintain mitochondria, and that's really what we have to do. And walking an hour a day can go a long way to fixing that. And I moaned when we started up the mountain that this was really hard and the terrain was tough and it was going to be a hard 100-mile race to myself. How am I ever going to do it? But then the next minute, I was like, how lucky I am to be able to do it. How fortunate I am to be able to choose to be out in the mountains and seeing the beauty around me and hiking wherever I want to go, not fearing that my health is in jeopardy because I can't breathe. So I'm very grateful for that. And given my family history, I don't know that that would have been true had I not been plant-based. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have been true if I was not plant-based. Running was the first thing I started to do. I changed my exercise habits before I changed my nutrition habits, but one thing led to another, and I'm very fortunate, and I feel like I'm an example of, despite a bad family history, what you can do with plant-based nutrition and exercise. And that's part of my why for Leadville, is to say, hey, you can write your story at any age. It doesn't have to be at this age you have to slow down. At this age you need to sit on the porch. You can do anything you want to if you make an effort to keep your body healthy through diet and exercise. So that's what I want to share with people over the next couple of months. In 2.5 weeks, I'll be out at Leadville to do the 50-mile race. I'm going to give it my best shot. I'll check back and let you know how that went. And then the 3rd week of August, I'll be towing the line for the 100-mile. Will I make it all the way? Who knows? But the chances aren't zero, and why not me? So I'm going to give it my best shot and smile as much as I possibly can and be grateful that I get the opportunity to do it. If you'd like to learn more about our practice or how we could help you become plant-based, please go to the website at drdulaney.com, DOCTORDULANEY, and check out our website. We have multiple levels that you can join. We have a full-time registered dietitian, nutrition classes, mobility classes. We'd love to help you on your journey. Thank you, as always, for listening. Share this podcast with your friends. There'll be reels on Instagram and Facebook to keep you up to date. Right now, I am doing the video podcast every other week. Probably going to increase that because I think I really do like that format, and I'm getting a lot of good feedback from that. So thank you, as always, for listening, and get out and walk and eat some greens. Thanks.